so appreciate you kind of being our first call-in guest guinea pig here, for lack of a better term.
Oh, no.
But thank you so much for coming on the show today. I am really excited to hear about your journey and your story and what you do. There's so much. I've checked out all your websites. You're a fabulous writer. You give so much great insight into the spiritual journey. And I know that a lot of that comes from your own experience, or, most of it. And then intuition and mediumship and all of that starts to play a part. So before we dive right in, I'm going to just do a few deep breaths. Would you join me?
Oh, absolutely. I could so use this right now.
I know. You know what? Let me tell you, this full moon and then the card that jumped out today, which they always seem to. We'll get to that a little bit later. But yeah, let's do a few deep breaths. Welcome to the show. And here we go. And just clearing everything out that doesn't belong. Okay.
Much better.
That is so really much better.
It totally
I know. I
is.
say I do that for the listeners, but really I think it's for me. I definitely could use that at the top of the show. But thank you again, Kimberly Deziree, for being here today. I know that you are kind of most popular at the moment for your Dear Desiree column on Spiritual Biz Magazine. And that is something so cool I'd love for you to touch on a little bit later. But why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself and give us a little bit about your background and your story?
Well, God, it's so funny. I had my awakening about 3 years ago. And, that's kind of when all of this started for me. I had, again, the same pattern in my life, the rug pulled out from under me. And it was to the point where, though, it brought me to my knees this time. And I literally laid on the floor after another breakup, believe it or not, of course. Another breakup brought me to my knees. And that's when we can all relate. Oh, it's so funny. It's like, how many times in our life do we, have those moments when we're on our knees and we beg God to help us? And when he does, as soon as things settle down, we don't do our work and we get right back into the habit of, getting in those patterns again. And this time I think the rug was pulled out from under me so hard that I, in those moments, I literally, begged God or the universe, I don't want to be her anymore. And I really meant it this time. Like, I really had that desire not to be that woman, or actually that girl that I was, with the trail of broken relationships and disasters behind me. So that's when my journey really began. And when I was really open to it, the universe started bringing the right people and the right things to me. And I had also, all my life I had been open to psychics and mediums, and I've always been intuitive, but I never really understood until I started to come out of, my coma, so to speak, and have my awakening and realize, like, these gifts, your sixth sense is really your biggest gift, and start to learn how to use that. So, it was 3 years ago when all this kind of happened, and I was, exploring the spiritual side of myself and trying to understand how I had gotten to a really bad place in my life, and looking at the past traumas and tragedies that I had grown up with all my life. And that's when the work really began. And, in the beginning, I was still naive to this and thought, wow, I'm learning all this stuff. I'm starting to be more intuitive. I know how to read cards, read people. And, I started, going to places to do classes and learn about this stuff. And I thought, oh, my goal is to open a metaphysical center and, get out of the hairdressing world, and I'm going to teach people about this. And it was really kind of funny when I look back, Shana, because I was just so new to this, and Spirit was like, you're on the right path. I got your attention. Your soul is like, okay, you're waking up, you're learning. But now, before you go out into the world to teach and help other people, you've got to heal and teach, learn about healing yourself and get rid of everything that is not you anymore. You have to unbecome everything that you think you are, because you're none of it. And when you get to that point and you can peel away every layer, then you'll be ready to go out and help other people with the knowledge and wisdom you've learned from your own journey. So that's kind of what happened. It was the fast track to spirituality for 3 years for me.
Wow. I know. I feel very much, because I know a little bit about your background from, some conversations before, and I feel like you just have the ultimate hero's journey story, because you shared with me that really everything had fallen apart. And it wasn't until it was because of that this, you arose as this phoenix, like we all have that opportunity to do. And so many people in the spiritual community, I think all of us really, we've got a story where everything fell apart for us to have that opportunity to come back together. And you have done it in such a big way. And now your mission is really to help people do the same. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I found when I went through this journey for the last 3 years, they call it the dark night of the soul. And for people who've gone through that, they know what I'm talking about. And it's no fun ride, I'll tell you that. It was brutal because it really was. It was. I mean, I wouldn't want to go through it again, but I'm actually very grateful that I had to really go on that journey, because there were times, honestly, and I'll be really honest, because I am an open book, that I did not want to go on. It was so painful, and it was just so difficult to have to face aspects of myself in the belief systems that were forged from, the trauma of my childhood and all the mistakes I had made along the way in my adult life. And to have to really go inward and face that stuff and understand it. And, there was no way of getting around it. Like, the universe was going to hold me accountable. It was holding me upside down by my feet, shaking it out of me, literally, until it got every drop of it out of me. And honestly, there were days when I just did not want to go on, and I had all I could do to go, and luckily I had the right friends and support systems to pull me through it. But one of these women that I know I've been going to for years, she's in her 80s, and she's a psychic, and her name's Virginia, and I absolutely love this woman. She told me, she said, dear, she says, every single bit of it, you had to live through it because there's a purpose for it, and you're going to use it in the future, and you're going to do it with a new name. Now I get what she was talking about. Because I changed, I changed my last name to Deziree, and all the information
I didn't know if that was like a first and middle name as someone who does that. That's my, I go by first and middle name, so I didn't know if that was yours.
No, actually, that name came to me as I've been going through this journey. Like a couple of years ago, Virginia had said I would be doing this work with a new name, and I thought, what? That's weird. And she goes, no, you will be. And I just kind of shook it off. It was no big deal. And then about a year and a half, 2 years ago, one of my favorite spiritual teachers is Michael Mirdad, and he's in Sedona, and I've had the privilege of working with him and doing private sessions and workshops. And he even said to me, he says, your last name has a really funky energy to it. You really need to get rid of it. And it was tied to my ex-husband, and, I had a very abusive, traumatic marriage for 10 years and probably 9 years after. He was a narcissist. And, every time I heard my last name, when people would refer to me, I would cringe. And I was like, you know what? I really should change my name. And then when I thought about my maiden name, that energy was tied to childhood abuse and trauma. And I thought, I don't want either one of those names, but I know I'm becoming a new person, as I had said earlier when I started my awakening, when I asked God, help me, I don't want to be her, and I really meant it, and my name had to go. So the reason Desiree came up was one day I was talking to my mom, and she goes, your name was supposed to be Desiree. And I'm like, you're kidding. I go, I love that. I said, I feel like a Desiree. So I decided to take it on as my last name instead and become Kimberly Deziree. And the minute I went to court, it just fit. I started doing the Dear Deziree column prior to changing my name legally. When I was first, I wanted something fun, and I thought Dear Deziree sounded cool. It had a good vibe to it. I said, you know what? I'm legally going to do this. I am becoming this person. This is truly who I am. So I went to court, and, in a matter of 5 minutes, the judge asked me, why are you doing this? I told her. She goes, well, as of now, you're Kimberly Deziree. And I even dropped my middle name because I didn't like that. So it was a great feeling, and I walked out of that courtroom, and I had such joy knowing that I really had done the work, and I wasn't a victim anymore of abuse and trauma and everything. I was this, like you said, this new person, the Phoenix. I had this new foundation in coming into who I'm supposed to be, and it was the most thrilling feeling. I felt alive and overjoyed, and I have never looked back as far as the name change. And, the cool part was my kids understood it, which I was wondering if they were going to have a hard time. But I said, as mom's becoming this new person, I feel like I need to have a new name. It has nothing to do with you guys. I love you. But I need to do this. And my kids were really cool, and they were proud of me because they had seen a lot of stuff that I've gone through. And, my children were part of some of the abuse and trauma of the marriage, and, even the fact that, I had to overcome alcohol addiction too, and my kids had seen in their younger years that stuff too. So my kids are really proud of me, and,
wow.
I'm shifting, holding the frequency for them now, breaking the cycle of, all of that family karma. I'm really changing things. Yeah, so it's been wonderful.
I love that. And I'm so pleased to speak with a mom, to be honest. I've had quite a few guests on the show. And first of all, I want to just say parents are just superheroes. I don't know how you do it. I'm not a parent yet in my life. I don't know if that will happen for me, but I see my mom and my dad and those around me who are parents, and I think it's unbelievable what you guys do. And I know a lot of them just say, like, you don't think, you just do, and that's kind of how it goes. But can you touch on your experience? I mean, you're going through all of this abuse, alcoholism, and I'm sure a lot of self-doubt and all of those painful things that we go through on our own. And now you've got kids in the mix. You've got, you're a parent trying to hold that space. What was that like? I mean, I'm just like, it's even more impressive to me that you have come full circle and you're juggling parenting.
Well, I'm so glad that you touched upon this, because I really feel like this is part of my mission too, to educate parents, especially of kids, and why people should do their work, because I came from a very, very dysfunctional background. I witnessed way too much that most kids should. And as a result, I took it all with me. And that's really why my whole life was a mess, most of my adult life. And my ex-husband, he has his own issues, and we had two dysfunctional people who collided and had kids. And
would you say
not
that you're
prepared for...
I was just going to mention that a lot of people, unwittingly, you've got a lot of pain and trauma, and you carry it into your adulthood, and then you meet a frequency match, which your husband may have been for you at some point, and then it's like a double whammy.
Yep, exactly. Because when I had met him, I was 31 years old, and I was just coming out of a divorce. I got married at 28, and I thought at 28 I'm supposed to be married, and I married the wrong person, thinking it was the right move, and it ended in a disaster. Needless to say, I was bankrupt, and it was just a bad situation. But I ended up meeting my second husband on the rebound. Again, no time to do the work. So anyway, so you get two dysfunctional people who have children. I'm 32 years old. I have my daughter, and I was not prepared for parenting. Most of my life I had said I'm never going to have kids, because deep down I didn't think I could be a good parent. And the reason that is because of what I experienced. I left home at 13, and, I just had a lot of stuff happen in my life because of my family situation, which, again, I totally forgive everything because I'm in that place. But what I did know is that I had my children, and, I was, as the marriage was getting worse and the violence was getting worse, my drinking got really bad. And finally, it got to a point where it was very violent. I have 3 kids, and I finally left for the safety of my own life, the fear of my own life. And at that point, I still drank. And so when I got sober 6 years ago, And my children, for the majority of their life, got to experience their mother who drank a lot. I owned a really big business, and I worked all the time. And, their father who, had his issues. And they really did not get the tools or what they needed. And in my own experience from still being a wounded person, being a parent, from the outside, it looked like I was doing a good job because I was making a ton of money. My kids had everything they needed. I went to all the parent-teacher things, and, I had big birthday parties. My kids would dress well. I had a beautiful home, and, I thought I was doing the right thing. And it wasn't until I got sober 6 years ago that my parenting, it was still overwhelming, and I hadn't really had my awakening for 3 years. So for the 3 years of sobriety, not being awake, my parenting was getting a little bit better. But until I realized that I was still the wounded child who was searching for her own parents, I couldn't be a parent to my own kids. And that's why it was critical for me to do that work for 3 years in that dark night of healing that part of myself and bringing myself out of the wounds and understanding my childhood and, understanding that for the majority of my life, I was actually looking for my own parents. So you've got like the mindset of a little girl running around looking for mommy and daddy. And it's like, well, I can't parent you kids. I'm still looking for my own parents. So that was a really hard thing to understand, but I could wrap my head around it now, and, I realized I have finally become the parent that I was searching for, and now the last part of my journey of going through this dark night has been to shift everything for my own kids and to give them the skills and the tools that I didn't have, and that was the biggest problem growing up in the family I did, that nobody was there for me to show me anything and to teach me anything. I just witnessed dysfunction at its finest. So, for me to understand, that I finally have a skill set and tools, and I'm working really hard. And I have to admit it was really difficult as I started to shift. The kids resisted more because, I trained them how to treat me, and being the wounded child looking for her own mom and dad, my kids were walking all over me. So for me to step into being a mother and to start, holding my center and not letting anything rock it, has been difficult. But the nice part about my journey now is this last leg is finally shifting, and I knew the last piece of all of this work would be trying to get my kids to start to come around and understand, and it's happening, and it's beautiful. So I really, for the parents that are listening, be really aware of what you're doing and saying in front of your kids from day one, because they're taking it all in, and it's registering in the back of their mind, and they're going to live out that life and those patterns in that frequency that they see and feel. So it's so, so important to really be careful what you do and say in front of your kids, and hold yourself accountable. And when you make a mistake, call yourself out on it and apologize to those kids and correct it. It's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I know. I try and just think of the mind, the brain as a chemical computer here. So any information that you are, imagine what you're always Googling, and then that's what is programmed into the computer. And so it's better to just think of things that way and to not feed incorrect information and poor habits, because then you have to retroactively go in and put in your antivirus software and stop those habits. So I think it's exactly what you're touching on here. And I so appreciate your hero's journey. Again, there's so much to it, and the parenting aspect. Thank you so much, because I love what you have to say to the parents here. It's a tough thing to begin with, and then we're living in a wild time. So
yeah, we are. There's so many outside influences too, and that's, the internet can be a wonderful thing because it connects people like us, and we're learning all this information. We're not being blinded by the media. We're actually able to find things. But the downside is that a lot of these kids are, getting their minds contaminated. So, my suggestion would be, spend as much time with your kids, get them outside, get them in nature, really talk to them, bond with them. and just, being their friend just doesn't cut it. You have to be a parent, and you have to set boundaries, healthy boundaries, and you have to teach them, just teach your kids, educate them so they can survive in the world. And when you send them out the door, they have the skill set, and they know what they're doing. I just, my biggest regret was not knowing. I didn't know, and I beat myself up for a while, but I'm like, you know what? At least I figured it out, and I've talked to my children in depth. I mean, my oldest is 19, and I have 15-year-old twins, and I've talked to them in detail, and really sat down and apologized for everything that they had to go through and what they witnessed, and let them know. I let them know part of my story so they understand who I am. And, that really shifted things. You have to be honest with your kids. And if you mess up, fix it. Say something. Talk to them. And, stop bringing your crap into their life because, I didn't want my kids to continue my story that I continued from my parents.
Yeah.
So,
I love your candor, and you're so just open to being vulnerable. And I have to say that it's so empowering to others because it allows them that space to do the same. So, it's just brilliant, Kimberly. I really am so thrilled to have you on the show, and it's so cool what you are now creating in your life and culminating for yourself and for others and your children. And wow, I'm curious what when you mentioned that dark night of the soul, what was your saving grace then? I know you're a big time reader and you're obviously a writer, so I don't know if you did a lot of journaling, meditation. Could you touch on that?
Yeah, well, when I went through that breakup and that whole thing started to fall apart, it's actually kind of a funny story because, again, when I was newly waking up and, this man that I thought that was the love of my life and I was going to marry, when we broke up and I started, kind of going on the spiritual path a little bit, it was like inspirational quotes that I would see on Facebook and, things like that started getting my attention. Spirit was calling me. So during this breakup, I started reading books and, I started taking classes, any place I could go to, to learn about, being more intuitive. And I've always loved the reading cards. That was, my favorite thing. So I was branching out. And every time this man would come back in my life, I'd start to share some of this stuff with him. And he's like, wow, you're changing. And I'm like, yeah. And I thought, okay, I'll get him to come on board with me. And he's going to wake up and we're going to be happily ever after, just like it was supposed to be. Because, I was naive.
I've been there.
Yeah, we're going to save everybody and bring them on the ride. We don't realize they're there to be the catalyst for us to wake up. And once they do their job, they need to go away. But I thought I'd bring them on the ride.
Oh my gosh, so well said.
Yeah, I found a book for him. I was visiting my daughter, and she was in Maine, and I had to go to the bookstore, and I found this book. I said, there has to be something simple he can read, because at this point I started getting into dimensional stuff and, kind of out there, and I knew he wouldn't understand it. So I found this book, and it was How to Heal the Heart and Soul by Michael Mirdad. And I said, oh, my gosh, that's the perfect book. It even has the same first name as this guy. It's got to be his book. So I give him the book. He never reads it. And one of the last times I was at his house, I was intuitive and I knew I was never going back. And I grabbed the book and I said, that's my book. I read that book, and that was the beginning of me really. It was, I swear, it was like so funny. I brought the book home and, as planned, he broke up with me. And I read the book and I thought, this is what I need. It actually started to teach me about how to heal on a soul level. And I had gone to therapy over the years, during divorces, during my bouts with alcohol and, that kind of stuff. Yeah. And what I realized is that, mental, physical, spiritual, and emotional are the four components to really heal. But the typical mainstream counselors don't teach you how to heal on a soul level. And that's really what I needed, is to really go that deep on a soul level to understand all this stuff. So for me to go through the dark night, it was mostly books that I was led to read by spiritual teachers. And it was about me also opening up my gifts. And some of the people who influenced me were Collette Baron Reid and Doreen Virtue. I read a lot of their books, and it was about, discovering your intuition and how to work with it. And that really started helping me through that dark night and understanding my role in it, how to communicate with spirit, my guides. And I have to say, one of the biggest things that shifted me was understanding energy.
And
which
is
when
everything.
I could understand energy,
everything is energy. We could just look at it like that.
Oh, it was amazing because when I really, really got that, that's when I could really navigate with what was happening and stop resisting what needed to be. Because, we all want to resist change, and fear was the biggest thing that was, holding me back my whole life. And, I decided I was going to look fear in the eye and conquer it, and it was no longer going to take me down. And I was not going to miss out on life and the future that was waiting for me. So I was determined. I was on a mission to do this, and it was through many wonderful books. It was going to metaphysical centers and working with people and taking classes to open up my gifts. And, I found a couple of great spiritual teachers that worked with me, coaching me one-on-one. So it was a bunch of different things, and all the pieces fell into place as I needed them, and I was ready for the next piece. Spirit would just lead me to that person or to that book or, whatever I needed. And it was really connecting with my soul, too. That was huge in understanding the aspects, the higher self, and being able to tap into that to help me in this 3D and to navigate in, what's my next move? Or, a lot of times when things are happening and my buttons were being pushed and I didn't know what to do, I knew enough to sit still and tune in and go, okay, Spirit, what's my move? Why is this happening? Show me. I want to get it. I know there's a lesson here. And I was really starting to work with it, and that's when it started to become easier, and I almost made a game out of it. It was like a challenge, and I love a challenge, and I'm like, okay, what's this thing that's next? I'm going to nail it, and I would work and roll through it as I was shifting and understanding energy and tapping into the universe. So that was kind of how it worked for me going through my dark night.
I know. I love that. I love the game framework because I do a similar thing too, especially when I have a very busy day. Okay. Game time. I'm like, what's my, I got to go, I got to eat at this time and I'm going to leave by that time. I'm going to make sure I pack it. And I make it like a fun game. And it sounds like you've done the same thing. And that's really what this is. We get to play this huge game and have these experiences. And again, everything is energy. If we can just look at it in that terms. But I love that for you listeners out there, truly. If you just look at things as like a game, and when something difficult comes up, if you can find it in yourself to almost chuckle and go, okay, universe, here's an opportunity. You're trying to show me something. I'm going to learn something, and I'm going to grow into my biggest and best and highest self. So
yes,
that is so much more fun, right? That kind of like relieves the tension when you're like, this is a game.
Well, it's true. I mean, when you realize how much you resist growth,
right? Yeah.
I mean, it's like we just resist it, and it just, we fight it. And when I finally comprehended, life is not happening to me, it's just happening. I would have to tell myself that all the time. Kim, this isn't happening to you, it's just happening. And when I could realize that, it's like, okay, well, this is happening.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to accept it and be in that place of acceptance, which shifted and changed everything. That was a game changer for me. It's like, okay, it's happening. I can't change it, so how am I going to work with it? How will I embrace this flow and work with whatever's coming towards me or whatever the universe wants? Because the minute I stopped fighting it and trying to control it, it just happened and it flowed. I mean, yes, sometimes it wasn't comfortable and it was painful, but I understood it and I knew it was necessary, and this was part of my growth. And I'm like, okay, I'm in complete surrender, and I'm going to go with it because there's no point in trying to fight what must be.
Yes.
And that changed everything. That really did.
And that gets you out of that victim mentality too, that victim mode. Why is this happening to me? Why is everything bad happening to me? Well, you have no power. You give your power away when you're coming from that angle, right? So it's
absolutely.
Yeah, to just be in the flow and know, just like you said, I love that. Just things are just happening. They're not happening to me. They're just happening. And it's always an opportunity. Life is always giving you that opportunity to to grow and expand and go. I mean, isn't that what we're here for? Isn't that
this
the whole
is school? Absolutely school. I'm like, oh wow, when do I get my degree? No, when I when I go, it's been hard. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's phenomenal. So now let's talk. I appreciate you sharing your history so much, because I think so many of us can identify. And then, we go online, we watch the YouTube. And why does someone else have it figured out? Why can't I figure it out? And so it's so great to hear someone's history and past and where they've come from, because no one, was born into this world having it figured out. There's always some kind of a story behind it. So I think I appreciate you sharing that with us, because I'm sure that it's going to help others feel that, okay, I'm not alone. You have been through hell and high water, as they say. So, and now, this writing, let's talk about Dear Desiree. I think it's so incredible. You're on almost how many, 30 articles on that? I know it's been running for quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I'm up to 30 episodes of the Dear Desiree, and I also write articles too. For some reason, I reach out to certain people that, for some reason, if they've touched my soul, I feel like, you know what, I want to acknowledge you and thank you, because you did shift my life just by being you, and I'd like to share you with the world. So I have written a few articles, 4 or 5 articles too, but the Dear Desiree thing, it's really kind of funny, because when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Dear Abby. Like, I love Dear Abby.
Yeah, I love Dear Abby.
And I've always loved psychics. I mean, I've been drawn to psychics. Little did I know, I was a 4th generation psychic. My mother, finally told me stuff later in life. But,
wow.
I had been a hairdresser for 33, 34 years, and I've always been in the healing arts and talking to people and giving advice and listening. So it's kind of always been there. I mean, I think Spirit was setting me up for the second half of my life, which became the Dear Desiree. So when I got involved with that, I was I was in a group on Facebook with Kimberly Maska for Spiritual Success. It was a closed group where I was learning a bunch of things, and I was doing a bit of beta testing for her. And then she had announced she was going to be having a magazine, and if anybody had any ideas and wanted to, participate. And I said, yeah, I'd like to be Dear Desiree. And that's how it started. I said, I give great advice.
I love it.
I said, everybody tells me I give great advice. And I said, I really kind of want to do something with that. I can see myself as Dear Desiree. So that started like a year ago. Yeah. So it was kind of funny, though. In the beginning, I envisioned it as a written column, just like Dear Abby. And, Kimberly had suggested I do it in a video or an audio, because that was up and coming and more people watch those. And honestly, I really didn't want to do it that way. But I thought, well, she knows more than I do. I'm looking to her. She's got a lot of great information. She's a wonderful teacher and coach. So I said I agreed to it. And that experience really pushed me out of my comfort zone. I never liked computers or technology, and I had to learn how to do audio, editing, things like that. And I actually went to a TV station, and I got certified as a TV producer. I got certified in editing, production. I can do anything in a TV studio at this point.
Do you sleep?
So for me to do that,
how do you do all this?
Honestly, Spirit led me, because in a million years I would have never thought I could do something like that. But I thought, if I have to do an audio version of Dear Desiree to get this thing going, I'm going to do it. I definitely did not want to be videotaped. I wasn't comfortable being videotaped. So I said I'd do the audio. And I'll tell you, there was many times I was kicking and screaming. I'm like, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. And I luckily, one of the guys at the TV station, I became friends with him. He's awesome. He helped me, and he showed me what to do. And we started producing some episodes, and it was really kind of funny, too, because when the questions were coming in from the magazine, I would read the questions, and I would panic. I sound terrible on there. I don't want to do this. And, I mean, it was just, when I look back a year ago, I'm laughing now, because when I read a question, I have no problem tuning in and answering it. But We did,
Wow.
I forget, I think I did maybe 17 episodes or less. I can't remember. It might have been less than that. But at that point, I was still going through my dark night, and I had to pull out of everything. I was mentoring with Kimberly. I was doing all kinds of stuff, and I finally realized I need to listen to my spirit, my soul. And I'm not ready to launch big. I'm not ready to do this. I don't want to do any more. And I completely went into hibernation, and I listened for once in my life. I said, you know what? I'm going to do this my way. And I put everything on hold, and I had about 6 months of really, really deep soul level healing. And that's where the worst of my stuff was. And I came through it, and I contacted her, and I said, hey, Kimberly, I'm back. I said, but I want to do it my way. And instead of being the old me where I let everybody kind of tell me, no, do things this way, that way, because that was part of my own not having confidence in my abilities of who I was, because I didn't have that from childhood. So I realized, you know what, you're going to do what you want to do, and you're going to listen to what your soul says and follow that, because that's going to lead you on the right path. And sure enough, she said, perfect, go for what you want to do. I totally support you. And that's when I started doing the written column. And from that point on, things really started taking off, and I started writing articles and, just have gotten involved in so many things. And I took everything back off the shelf that I put away with my mentoring, and I started I took my courses back out that I wrote, and I started tweaking them and updating them based on the information I experienced of healing for the last 6 months, and really, channeled my inner editor, because I wasn't really good at editing in the beginning. And everything just started flowing, and it's led me to so many wonderful places. I've been teaching in metaphysical centers, doing a lot of online work. I do a lot of readings and sessions. I do a lot of coaching. And the Dear Desiree opened a lot of doors for me, and I just love that column because it's exactly what I envisioned. And, I'm really thrilled with the amount of people that I'm reaching. And I love the fact that people are sharing themselves with me, and I feel honored that they trust me enough to be vulnerable and work with me. So it's been a real gift. I just love the Dear Desiree, and I put it out there wherever I can. I share it, and I post it on my Facebook group every Friday so the people in the group can see it, and anybody who wants to see it can go on spiritualbizmagazine.com, and it's online. They can see all my episodes.
Perfect. And what would be the best way for someone to submit a question to Dear Desiree?
Well, they can submit it to me. I have my own email address at the magazine. It's deardesiree@spiritualbizmagazine.com. And if you want, I can spell it for you because it's spelled a little bit differently. DearDeziree at Spiritual Biz, it's B-I-Z, magazine.com. And there's a form they can fill out and, submit it to me. Or they could reach out to me, on Facebook at my closed group, Coming Out of the Spiritual Closet, too. I can always send them there, too. But, yeah, it's Dear Desiree at spiritualbizmagazine.com.
Awesome. I know. And eventually when, I love Blog Talk Radio here. Thank you for hosting us, but I'm still trying to work out the kinks of their system. And eventually we are going to have you back on, and we want to take some of these live Dear Desiree questions. I think that would be so much fun. If people are, brave enough to come out and do that, we'd love to hear from you. I think that would be a blast.
Oh, I can't wait to do that. I think that would be fantastic. I really do. I really am looking forward to doing that. I think it'll be awesome.
I am as well. So now you mentioned that it sounded like you didn't really grow up in a very spiritual or metaphysical household, yet you found out later in life that you're fourth generation psychic mediumship. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about that. That's so fascinating.
I grew up, my father was Irish Catholic, and my mother is Hungarian. I believe she was Catholic when she lived in Budapest. But I pretty much grew up with, going to church on an Irish Catholic church in the holidays and things like that. What I do remember is at a young age, I was very awake and aware, and I was very open to the spirit world. And about the age of 5 is when it shut off, and that's when I just completely shut off, and, you know, I was gone at that point. So during, you know, growing up without the spirituality, and I had no belief in God. I remember my sister, you know, she would love to go to communion and all those things, and I refused to go to church. I didn't believe there was a God. I didn't buy into any of that stuff. In fact, it used to make me really angry as a kid. You know, being forced to go there and listen to all that stuff, I would get really angry, and it felt uncomfortable. And it just
I would get some of my
right
best sleep, and some of my best sleep would happen in church.
Yeah, it was just like,
but I know
like,
I had a similar experience where it just I really resonated with Jesus and his story, but as far as the church and the whole thing, it gave me a very actually kind of yucky feeling. With all due respect to anyone, you know, in organized religion, it's just personally I can identify with what you're expressing.
Yeah, well, you know, because of the trauma from my childhood, you know, I can give you a little bit of background that it might help, but, you know, my mom came from a country, she was a ballerina, and my grandmother was an opera singer, and they toured all over Europe, and, you know, she had a beautiful, wonderful life, and then there was the Hungarian Revolution, and in a moment's notice, they were told they had to leave because there were people coming to basically take out my grandfather because he was part of some of the rebels who stole some guns to fight the, you know, the communists or whoever was there. So they had to leave everything in a moment's notice. And my mother ended up in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which is, you know, not the greatest place in the world. It's kind of, you know, not good. So she came here, and none of them speaking a word of English, just knowing that, you know, she was traumatized with bombs going off and seeing people murdered and left her life. And so she came here. They hated this country. They didn't want to be here. They wanted to go home. They could never go home. So, you know, that was the energy coming from them. And then my dad, you know, he grew up with a family, you know, where, you know, my grandfather had another family across town, you know, and there was a lot, my father was hit a lot, and there was a lot of trauma in his life. So that's the parents that I came from. And, you know, they got together young to escape their family life. And, you know, my parents were very young when they had us. So my father found drugs at a young age and got addicted to heroin. So I grew up with a mother that could barely speak English. We were really, really poor. And, you know, the welfare, they used to come drop the box of food off on the porch. It was, like, really embarrassing. I hated that. You know, it was awful. You know, it was just like, you know, I blocked out most of my childhood. My sister always was like, you know, do you remember this? Do you remember that? I'm like, no, because I don't want to. But, you know, it was quite traumatic. You know, as far as my parents, my father was in and out of prison most of my life. He was on heroin. My mother became a massive alcoholic, and there was always different people, you know, around us. And my mother always had different boyfriends, and you know, she made it clear she didn't want us, and you know how much we ruined her life and wish she didn't have us. And you know, it was just, she was always looking for a man or a boyfriend to take care of her, and always pushed us to the side. And so I knew I wasn't wanted, or, you know, I didn't get what I needed in a home. I didn't have a mother and father that were there to love me, support me, make me feel safe. In fact, I grew up feeling very unwanted, and I felt very abandoned. I felt very scared, and I wasn't secure with myself. I was frightened. You know, it wasn't a good way to be. And you know, not having a dad there to make me feel safe and special, like a girl should have that love from a father. You know, it pretty much messed me up, and I started drinking at 13 years old. And left home, actually. My father was not in my life most of the time. So I left home. And, you know, from 13 on, I was, you know, the wild child running the streets, drugs, alcohol. You know, part of my story, unfortunately, is that, you know, I actually had been raped, too, at 13. So
oh my
because
gosh,
of where I was,
you couldn't write this. I mean, this is a film here. This is unbelievable.
Yeah,
which again,
I'm totally okay with it, though.
Yeah. No, I can feel that. I mean, your candor is just unbelievable. I think you need to officially start wearing Wonder Woman T-shirts underneath all your clothing, because you are. I mean, this is unreal what you've come from and where you are now. So, wow. I'm sorry, but continue.
Yeah, it was just, it was really messed up, my whole life. So to go back to the question about, religion in my life and stuff like that, I was just so angry. I mean, my role, I think at 13, when I just, the thing that kind of sent me over the edge, and this is from me doing my work and Spirit giving me this one piece, I needed to know the moment in time where I abandoned myself. And it was at 13 years old, because I had left home. My mother had met a new guy, and my sister and I couldn't take it. He was trying to, step in. Oh, I'm going to be your father. And it was like, oh, I don't think so. So my mother and I had a falling out. I left home. We ended up at my grandmother's, and, my mom never even called to see where we were. And, like a week later, my aunt and grandmother were like, do you even want the kids? They're here. And she said, no, you keep them. And she signed the papers away. So that was devastating to me, and that's when I got really angry, and, I was having a hard time with it. And my sister made peace with my mother, and about a year later, she finally convinced me to talk to my mother I think I was 14, and I wanted to go home in the worst way. It was like all I wanted was my mother, and she finally let me come back. And I was there for about 2 weeks, and this is what really was crazy when I think about it, how this affected my entire life, is I remember going there knowing deep down I wasn't staying, and that no matter how perfect I would be, she's going to get rid of me again. And sure enough, I went there for 2 weeks. There wasn't a room for me to sleep on because they moved out of the house we were renting, so I had to sleep on the couch. And, I remember doing everything, trying to be as perfect as I could, not to give her an excuse to dispose of me again. Sure enough, 2 weeks into it, she took me for a ride. She said, come on, I got to go buy a pack of cigarettes. And it was raining out, and I got in the car, and I had that sinking feeling in my stomach. And I remember that's the first time I ever felt that feeling, which stayed with me my whole entire life, was that in the solar plexus, and I knew it was coming. And she said, you know what? This just isn't working out. My boyfriend doesn't want you here. You have to go back to your grandmother's. And that's what destroyed me. Wow. And I sat there and I said, that's okay, Mom. I understand. And I left. And that's when I learned that I have to be perfect so nobody disposes of me. So every relationship I had, I would attract people that deep down I knew would destroy me and get rid of me, but I would be perfect. And I also, I better not speak up and say how I feel because they'll get rid of me. So, that whole experience, just messed my life up. And when I left that at that point, I believe that's where the drinking, the drugs, and all that stuff started happening, and, the rape and all that. And that's where I thought there was no God because, if you love me, God, how can you let this happen to me? And I felt alone in the world, and I was lost. And, I was just, wild child. I was sneaking out of my grandmother's house in the middle of the night and, partying. And so I didn't have God or a belief in anything most of my life. And even as I got older and I had the moments of happiness, I met my first husband when I was in my early 20s. And at that point, I ended up in rehab for 28 days and got sober. And I had the fairy tale marriage and, the big house, the boat, the dogs, the fancy car. And, out of the blue, he tells me he wants a divorce. We're going bankrupt. He's losing everything. And I couldn't understand, why is this happening to me? Why have I had so much trauma in this? And I really did not feel loved ever. I didn't know what love was my entire life. I thought I did. Yeah. And I realized I was seeking something outside of myself my entire life. And I was seeking God. I was seeking love itself. And I didn't realize that it was an inside job and that I had to find it within. Yeah. And so, it was really amazing, though, to go through this whole journey and understand what this love thing was all about in God. And I realized, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, has loved me all along. Yeah. And God itself is pure bliss. And there's no way that any of this was God. This was all the negative forces. This had nothing to do with God. And this was, God was there waiting for me all the times I was on my knees or I got sober or whatever. It was just that I forgot who he was as soon as things settled down, and I'd go back to being the old me, and, off the path I went until the next disaster happened. So, the awakening for me was the best thing that ever happened, and I totally know that Spirit's got me and loves me, and there's nothing like that feeling of that unconditional love. And as far as the parents that I never had, I feel that love from God or the universe now, and that's my parent. I feel Mother, Father, God, the planet is all of it, and I know that my spiritual self and my spiritual family is really where it's at. It's not the 3D and the stuff I experienced, because I could spend my whole life waiting for my family to be what I want them to be, and it's never going to happen. And I've come to peace with that, and I realize the people who are in my life now, the spiritual family, and, the ones I can see here, or the ones, in the higher dimensions, that's really my family. And I know I'm loved. I'm truly loved, and I finally love myself. I don't, I don't hate myself anymore. So it was great. It was a great thing to go through.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm near tears here. This moon has made me, this full moon has made me so weepy, and I'm just completely wowed by where you've come from.
I feel free.
And what you've experienced.
I feel so free.
Oh, it just touches my heart.
I mean, I have no problem sharing anything that I've been through, because I am in total peace with myself and what I've experienced, and I'm not the victim where it happened to me. I've become the woman I'm supposed to be, and I'm now stepping into the role that I'm supposed to, and that is to help other people through their pain and suffering, because I've been there, I've lived it, and I've come through it, and that's the people that seem to be guided to me, because in fact, I had a reading I did this morning, and, I nailed everything before, we even talked. I already tuned in and I said everything. And it was so funny, because all the things that she validated that I brought up, I shared with her, yes, I've had that experience, and yes, I've had that experience, and I've had that experience. And she's like, oh, my God, I don't believe in coincidence. I said, no, there's a reason that you had this reading with me, because I can relate and I can help you. So, I love the outcome of this, of how it works.
I know, right? Well, that's the thing. It does sound, as you tell your tale, it does sound a bit like your intuition was with you all along, and we just go against it a lot. But is that fair to say that you were mentioning feeling it kind of in your solar plexus, like you knew it was going to be the last time that you'd see your mom at that point and your husband at that point, and it sounds like your intuition was just it was always on.
It was always on. It's kind of funny, because I tell people, I said, when you get that feeling, that's your intuition, that's your soul going, hey, warning, red flag. You really need to listen to that. And I as I've gone through this journey, I've realized it's not what I think, but what I feel. And that is my navigation. It's what I feel. Where is it sitting in my body? How am I feeling with whatever's going on? Because that's going to direct me into the right place to be and take me out of something that might not be good for me. So, it's that feeling you get. It's like, how do I feel in this moment? Where is this sitting? And, that solar plex thing, clearing out those lower three chakras during this dark night was really difficult. But, as I've gone through the clearing and clearing the chakras and, going up the ladder, it's been like, to enlightenment. It's like, wow, this was such a journey, but my God, I am so grateful that I went with it and I didn't fight it. I'm so grateful, even though it didn't happen until I was almost 50 years old. I didn't waste anything, because every single thing, like that lady said, I needed it. I needed to go through it because it would serve a purpose. And it's kind of funny, because before I shut off around the age of 5, I always knew the second half of my life was going to be really important, and I didn't know why. I do now.
That is so cool, and that's a great thing for our listeners to hear. It is never ever too late to make that change and have your awakening, right? I mean, I just picture you in a marathon, and I'm like seeing you run across that finish line, Kimberly. That's like the image that I have in my head. I'm just I'm just cheerleading you all along the side. It is so cool. Oh my gosh. Your story is just so incredible. I know you are you're writing a book, you're working on a book. Are you going to share some of this in that? Or I know you mentioned something about your spiritual quotes. You just have so much to share. So what will that book look like?
Well, I got my hands in so much.
I know.
I started writing inspirational quotes when I first started waking up because, like I said, in the beginning, what got my attention were those quotes on Facebook when I was really having a hard time. I would see, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change by, Dr. Wayne Dyer. And, I mean, those things really spoke to me. And then I found myself starting to rip some really good quotes out. And I started sharing them. And people were resonating, and they were sharing them and commenting them. And I was like, oh, this is really cool.
Wow.
So that's what kind of started my writing. And then I decided I wanted to write about the dark stuff. And that's when I really started getting into, sharing my story. And that's what brought the Coming Out of the Spiritual Closet on Facebook to life. But as far as my writing my book, I decided to take 33 of my favorite quotes that I came up with and really tell a story with them. And I started channeling a book for that. And I have 6 subheadings. And I had to stop on the last one because it was love. And like I said, I hadn't experienced that part yet. So I started taking my quotes, putting them in different categories and of the other 5 for the book, and then really writing in detail what my experience was, which led me to create that quote and share it. So it's kind of my story in a sense. Yeah, so I believe the love part is starting to come to me because I'm getting inspired to write again, and I've been jotting down quotes about self-love and certain things that I didn't know about when I started my book last year. So I'm feeling like Spirit's going, okay, you're at the end here, you're getting it. When you get that, the book's done. So, I've had an editor working on it, and I'm just hoping once I put this last piece in that I can somehow find a way to publish it because I want to use it, share it to inspire other people. And I actually, it's kind of funny, I had submitted my book to a book club online where it was a open, I don't remember what it was, but it was something in London, and I got to share pieces of my book, and the response was fantastic. So I am hoping at some point I can get it published because I think it's pretty good. I like it. I'm proud of it.
Oh my gosh, phenomenal! I can't wait to read that, to see that, and any publishers or anyone listening, if you can help out here,
contact me.
This is something that will tremendously help. It's funny. I thought we had about 30 minutes left. If it cuts us off here, oh boy. Okay. Kimberly, I don't know how we did this, but we ran through time so quickly. Gosh, okay. I thought I gave us a little more wiggle room, but my gosh, this means we're just going to have you back on here again. and again and again.
I would love it.
And we'll have some Dear Desiree, and just give us a quick shout out how we can get in touch with you and follow you. I have all the links in the description as well, but anything else you want to add to the end of our episode here?
Well, my website will be coming in August, and it's www.kimberlydesiree.com. And I will have a lot of my courses. I'll have free downloads for some of the little mini creations I've shared with some of my friends. I'll have a lot of my episodes and things like that. But I really, truly want to thank you. I am so honored that you had me on the show, and I'm so glad that I met you. I think you're a beautiful soul, and I absolutely love what you're doing. And I really wanted to make sure I told you that. You're a sweetheart.
Oh, Kimberly, thank you so much for being here. I feel the exact same way, and thank everyone for listening. We love you guys. I can't wait to have you back. There's still so much more to talk about, and thank you again, Kimberly. Yeah. We'll talk soon.
Okay.
All right, darling. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.